A brave 7-year-old girl, tears streaming, pleads with a cold billionaire CEO to give her a job. Not for herself, but to save her dying mother. One desperate plea could change both their lives forever. Hello beautiful souls and welcome to Ms. Love Stories channel. The place where love, drama, and unforgettable moments come alive. I'm so thrilled you're here, ready to dive into stories that will make your heart race, bring tears, and leave you believing in the power of love. Before we begin, I want to get to know all of you. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because in the next video, I'll give a special shout out to some of you amazing viewers from around the world. I can't wait to see how far our love story family reaches. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you never miss a single emotional journey. Get ready to feel, laugh, cry, and fall in love all over again. Because every story we share here is for you. Now, the story begins. Rose. The small kitchen smelled of boiled potatoes and a faint tang of medicine. Cynthia's little hands, smudged with flour from trying to bake something for her mother, trembled slightly as she stirred the thin soup. 7 years old, but with eyes too wise for her age, she glanced over at her mother's bed. The sheets were neatly tucked, but her mother's shallow breaths betrayed the battle raging inside her fragile body. "Mommy," Cynthia whispered, pressing a cold hand to her mother's forehead. "Please wake up." Her mother's eyelids fluttered, but the words that came out were soft, unintelligible, drowned in the beeping of the old hospital monitor borrowed from a neighbor. Cynthia swallowed a lump in her throat, fighting the panic that always threatened to take over. She wasn't afraid of dying herself. She barely understood death, but the thought of losing her mother made her chest ache as if it were being squeezed. Cynthia wiped her tears on the sleeve of her worn cardigan and turned her attention back to the task that had been on her mind all morning. She needed a job. Not for fun, not to earn pocket money. This was life or death. Somewhere, she had heard of the rich and the powerful, people who could make miracles happen with a single signature. And there was one name she remembered her mother speaking of in happier times. Jerry, a billionaire CEO, someone so untouchable, and so far away from her little life that it made her heart pound just thinking of it. She folded a small, trembling handwritten note into her tiny backpack. "Please, sir, I need a job to save my mommy. I will do anything." It was her only hope, her single lifeline. Far above the streets, in a gleaming tower that glimmered like a beacon of success, Jerry sat in his corner office. The walls were lined with awards, photographs of grand launches, and his reflection staring back from polished surfaces. To anyone else he was untouchable, rich, brilliant, confident. But as he looked out the window at the city sprawled below, a hollowness gnawed at him, invisible to the world. He sipped his espresso, but it tasted bitter, leaving a hollow aftertaste. Another board meeting, another deal, another face congratulating him while failing to see the loneliness that had been his companion for years. He rubbed his temple. His heart, if he still had one for others, felt strangely heavy that morning, but he could not place why. The sharp ring of his assistant's phone pulled him back. "Sir," she said briskly, "there's someone here to see you." "A little girl?" Jerry arched an eyebrow, surprised. "A child? In my office?" "She says it's important," the assistant added, clearly skeptical. "She looks desperate." Jerry leaned back, curiosity prickling at the edges of his exhaustion. Desperation. He hadn't seen it in years, hadn't felt it, not really. There was something about it, a raw, unpolished humanity that made him uneasy. But his schedule didn't allow for interruptions, especially not from children. Still, something in the tone of the assistant's voice made him pause. And somewhere deep inside, buried under decades of carefully constructed walls, he felt the faint stirrings of a thought he couldn't ignore. What could this child possibly want from me? Cynthia's small fingers pressed against the door of Jerry's skyscraper lobby. The air-conditioned chill made her shiver, but she held her note tightly, her resolve stronger than any fear. She had never met a billionaire. She didn't know how to act, how to speak, how to reach someone like him. But she had to try. Her eyes scanned the grand lobby, the polished marble, the golden chandeliers, the hum of elevators. And for a moment, she felt very, very small. But her mother's face, pale and trembling, flashed in her mind. She swallowed, squared her tiny shoulders, and marched toward the reception. "Hello, sir." she said when she was finally ushered into the office. Her voice was small, but it carried a weight that seemed to silence the room. I need a job. Please. I'll do anything. My mommy, she's very sick. Jerry froze. His cup hovered midair. The city outside seemed to hush, holding its breath. A little girl. 7 years old. And yet, something in her eyes, the courage, the fear, the love, struck him harder than any business report ever could. He opened his mouth to speak, but words felt inadequate, trivial. All he could do was stare, realizing that for the first time in years, the world outside his boardroom walls was about to get very real. And very personal. Would you help a child in her place? Comment Billonaire? Jerry's office felt impossibly large as he gestured for Cynthia to sit on the small leather chair across from his desk. She climbed up carefully, her little legs dangling over the edge. She clutched her folded note like a shield. You want a job? He asked slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. It sounded stranger than he expected, soft, hesitant, almost human. He glanced down at her small frame, wondering how someone so tiny could carry so much weight in her eyes. Cynthia nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, sir. Please, my mommy is sick. She can't get better unless I can help. I'll do anything. Anything. Her words trembled, but her gaze never wavered. There was no cunning here, no manipulation, just raw, unpolished desperation and love. Jerry leaned back, suddenly unsure. Children weren't supposed to talk like this. They weren't supposed to make grown men feel small, guilty, or helpless. And yet, here he was, heart tightening at the sight of her hopeful, tear-brimmed eyes. Cynthia, is it? He asked. Yes, sir. You understand, this is unusual, he said, carefully choosing words. Very unusual. I know, sir, she whispered. But I have to try. Please. There was a pause. Jerry looked down at the note she had placed on the desk. The paper was creased from being folded so many times, the handwriting small and messy, but perfectly legible. He read the words again. Please, sir, I need a job to save my mommy. I will do anything. The simplicity of it struck him harder than any eloquent plea or corporate presentation ever could. It wasn't ambition. It wasn't greed. It was love. Pure, desperate love. I don't usually do this, he murmured, almost to himself. I know, Cynthia said quietly. Her voice was small but unwavering. I'll work hard. I promise. Please, sir, I need a chance. Jerry's eyes softened. He felt the stubborn walls around his heart wobble, threatening to crumble. He didn't understand why, but something about her, the way she spoke, the way she believed, made him want to step outside of his controlled, predictable life. A sudden sound from the elevator lobby drew his attention. A colleague walking past, completely unaware of the delicate, life-changing moment happening inside the office. Jerry clenched his fist under the desk, knowing he couldn't yet allow the world to intrude. This was private. This was delicate. This could not be judged by anyone else. For the first time in years, he considered something that had nothing to do with profit, contracts, or success. Something that mattered purely because it was human. All right, he said finally, his voice gentle, measured. I can't make any promises yet. But, let's see what we can do. Okay. Cynthia's eyes lit up like fireworks. She nodded vigorously, the smallest smile tugging at her lips. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Jerry caught himself smiling too, though he tried to hide it. Something fragile had been set in motion, and neither of them knew how far it would go, or how much it might change them both. He glanced out the window at the city below. The sunlight reflected off the skyscrapers, glinting in a way that suddenly felt warmer, almost welcoming. Maybe today, the impossible had begun. What would you do if a 7-year-old begged you for help? Comment Billonaire? The office fell into a heavy silence after Cynthia's words. Jerry sat frozen, staring at the small, trembling figure before him. 7 years old. A little girl, but carrying a weight heavier than most adults could bear. He had dealt with contracts, boardrooms, and crises, but nothing had ever made his chest ache like this. Cynthia's eyes, glossy with unshed tears, met his, unwavering despite her fear. Please, sir. I'll do anything. I need a chance. My mommy, she's very sick. Jerry cleared his throat, trying to summon authority, but his voice faltered. He had rehearsed what he might say to 1,000 business inquiries, but none of that mattered here. This wasn't business. This was life, raw and fragile. He leaned back in his chair, hands steepled in thought. How could he respond? A tiny human's desperation pulled at him in ways logic and reason could not contain. He thought of the piles of emails demanding his attention, of meetings, of deadlines. But all of it felt meaningless compared to the trembling hope in her voice. Cynthia, he said finally, his voice softer than he intended. I don't know what to say. This isn't normal. People don't usually ask me for help like this. I know, sir, she whispered, biting her lip. I just had to try. I don't know what else to do. Her honesty, her courage, and her vulnerability struck him to the core. He had never realized how much power a simple human plea could have over him. All his life, people had approached him for favors, for money, for influence. But never like this. Never with love as the motivation. He looked at the note she had handed him earlier. The edges were frayed from being folded and unfolded countless times. The handwriting, small and uneven, carried more meaning than any polished letter ever could. Please, sir, I need a job to save my mommy. I will do anything. Jerry's chest tightened. He felt something stir deep within. A long-buried sense of responsibility, a flicker of empathy, a pulse of care that he had buried beneath years of business and solitude. For a long moment he said nothing. The only sound was Cynthia's quiet breathing, steady but filled with hope. He could feel it like electricity in the air, hope so delicate that even the smallest misstep could shatter it. Finally, Jerry leaned forward. All right, Cynthia. I can't promise anything yet. But we'll see what we can do. I need to understand everything first. But I want to try. Cynthia's face lit up instantly, a radiant smile breaking through the tension. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Jerry felt an unfamiliar warmth. A tug in his chest that was part pride, part fear, and part something he couldn't quite name. He had just been reminded of what it felt like to be truly human. To be touched not by power or wealth, but by love. He didn't yet know how far this would go, how it would change his life, or hers. But one thing was certain. The spark had been lit. A fragile bond had begun to form, and the universe, in its quiet way, had started to shift. If you were in Jerry's place, what would you do? Comment Bilou? The office door clicked shut, leaving Jerry alone with the lingering echo of Cynthia's plea. He ran a hand through his hair, heart still tight from the encounter. He couldn't deny the pull of her desperation, the raw purity in her eyes, but reality, the world of business, propriety and expectation, pushed back hard. Children weren't supposed to stand in boardrooms asking adults for favors. They weren't supposed to carry the weight of life and death in their small hands. And yet, here was Cynthia, 7 years old, pleading for her mother's survival. Jerry sat back, staring at the folded note on his desk. He wanted to act. He wanted to reach out, to offer a solution, to ease her fear, but doubts clawed at him. Was it safe? Was it appropriate? What if he failed her? What if this opened a door he wasn't ready to enter? Meanwhile, Cynthia walked through the lobby, trying to steady herself. The grand marble floors, the echoing footsteps, the cold chill of the air conditioning, it all felt alien. She had felt hope, just a flicker, when he had agreed to consider her plea. But now, doubt gnawed at her tiny heart. Had she done something wrong? Was she too small, too powerless? Her mother's face came to mind, pale and fragile, and tears threatened to spill again. She had to be strong. She had to believe. She had to try again. Back in the office, Jerry's assistant peeked in cautiously. "Sir, she's waiting outside," she said. "What should I tell her?" He sighed, torn. "Tell her. I'll think about it," he murmured, almost bitterly at himself. "Tell her nothing is decided yet." Cynthia, sitting on the bench in the lobby, folded her hands in her lap. Her small fingers twisted nervously. She wanted to run back, to cry, to scream at the unfairness of it all. But she didn't. She had learned to wait, to hope, even when everything seemed impossible. The next few days stretched on, filled with bureaucratic delays and small, almost cruel reminders of the gap between her world and his. Jerry avoided direct decisions, parried with excuses, delayed meetings. Each delay felt like a dagger in Cynthia's chest. She had never felt so powerless. And yet, neither of them could ignore what had happened. Jerry felt it in quiet moments. In the silence of his office, in the hollow ache after meetings, in the strange compulsion to glance at the little folded note he had kept tucked in a drawer. Cynthia felt it too, in every heartbeat, every whispered prayer beside her mother's bed. Resistance, it seemed, was both their shield and their torment. Neither wanted to admit it, but both were already drawn into a connection neither fully understood. By the end of the week, the tension had grown, thick as the winter air outside the skyscraper. Jerry knew he could delay no longer. Cynthia's courage and her desperation were not going to let him remain passive. He would have to face the pull between his heart and his habits. And in the quiet of that decision, both of them hovered on the edge of change, caught between fear, hope, and the undeniable tug of something far bigger than either could control. Would you wait patiently for someone who might hold your future in their hands? Comment Billonaire. The snowstorm outside had trapped both Cynthia and Jerry in the office building far later than either expected. What was meant to be a brief meeting had stretched into hours, and now, with the streets impassable and the elevators shut down, neither could leave. Cynthia shifted on the small sofa in the corner, hugging her knees. Her tiny frame looked even smaller against the vast office, and her eyes darted nervously toward Jerry, who was pacing slowly near his desk. He had removed his tie and loosened his jacket, a sign that even he couldn't pretend business as usual anymore. "Are you okay?" Jerry asked cautiously, trying to sound casual, though his voice carried a subtle concern he couldn't hide. Cynthia nodded. "I'm fine, sir. Just a little cold." Her small hands rubbed together, and she tucked the note she had brought earlier into her sleeve, as if keeping it close made the problem smaller. Jerry crouched slightly, trying to meet her eye level without looming over her. "You know, you really shouldn't have stayed so late at your mom's side. She must need you." His words were gentle but firm, carrying the weight of care that felt foreign to him. Cynthia's eyes glistened. "I can't leave her, sir. I just had to try. I had to speak to you." Her voice wavered, revealing both bravery and vulnerability. The storm outside grew louder, wind howling against the windows, a reminder that they were temporarily cut off from the rest of the world. And in that isolation, the walls between them seemed to drop just a little. Jerry, normally distant and composed, found himself drawn into her world. A world of raw honesty and urgent love. He fetched a blanket from his office closet, draping it around Cynthia's shoulders. She shivered slightly under it, and he hesitated, his hand lingering for a fraction longer than necessary before retreating. It was a gesture so small, yet it carried volumes. Protection, empathy, and something he wasn't accustomed to feeling for anyone. They settled into a quiet corner together, the storm raging outside, forcing them into shared space, shared silence, and shared humanity. Words were scarce, but the unspoken connection grew stronger. Jerry felt a protective instinct he hadn't realized existed, and Cynthia, for the first time, felt that someone in this vast, indifferent world might truly see her struggle. Hours passed in a mixture of conversation, small laughter over stories she told of her mother, and moments of quiet reflection. The forced proximity gave them no choice but to engage, to notice the humanity in each other, and to acknowledge the fragile bond forming between them. By the time the storm began to die down, both of them had changed subtly. Jerry's heart felt a new weight, one of responsibility and care, and Cynthia's courage had been bolstered by the knowledge that, for the first time, an adult had truly listened to her, truly cared. It was a small, temporary reprieve from the outside world, but one that had already left a lasting mark on both of them. Have you ever been forced into a moment that changed how you see someone? Comment Billonaire. The quiet corner of the office had become a fragile sanctuary, but beneath the surface of their growing bond, shadows of the past waited to emerge. Jerry, normally composed and impervious to emotion, found himself watching Cynthia with a mixture of concern and admiration. Her courage, despite her age, was extraordinary, but there was pain behind her bravery, a story yet untold. "Cynthia," he began cautiously, "tell me, why are you so brave? Most kids your age," he trailed off, realizing words weren't enough to capture the weight of her actions. She looked down at her small hands, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. My mommy, she's always been sick. I don't want her to be alone. I just can't let her give up. Her voice wavered, and for the first time, Jerry noticed how thin she really was, how fragile. Something inside him tightened. He thought of his own childhood, of long corridors and empty rooms, of a father who taught him business before bedtime stories, of affection measured in achievements. He understood what it meant to bear loneliness and responsibility too early. I understand, he said quietly, almost to himself. Sometimes life expects too much of the youngest among us. Cynthia's eyes lifted, curious and slightly hopeful. You understand? Jerry nodded, swallowing a lump in his throat. He hadn't intended to reveal so much, but the sight of her small face, earnest and filled with fear, broke through his usual restraint. Yes, I understand what it's like to carry burdens that feel too heavy, to feel powerless, even when everyone expects you to be strong. For a moment, they simply sat in silence. The storm outside had faded, leaving the city lights to glimmer softly through the windows. Cynthia slowly spoke, her voice quieter now, tinged with shame and fear. Sometimes, I wish I could be normal. I wish I didn't have to worry about grown-up things. Jerry's heart ached. He wanted to protect her, to take away the fear, but he knew he couldn't fix everything. Still, he could be present. He could listen. He could care. You're not alone, he whispered. And it's not your fault. You're doing everything you can, and that makes you stronger than most people I know. A small, tentative smile appeared on Cynthia's face. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of relief, a sense of being seen and understood. The walls she had carried for so long began to crumble, just a little. Jerry realized that his own past, long buried beneath success and isolation, had prepared him to recognize her pain. Their shared understanding, though unspoken at first, forged a bond neither had anticipated. One built on empathy, trust, and the quiet acknowledgement of each other's struggles. In that moment, the past and present collided, revealing both vulnerability and strength. And though neither of them could fully predict what the future held, they knew that the connection formed in that quiet office corner was real, and powerful enough to change them both forever. Have you ever felt someone truly understood your pain without needing explanation? Comment Billonaire? The storm had finally passed, leaving the office bathed in the soft glow of city lights. Cynthia sat curled up in a chair, her small frame wrapped in the blanket Jerry had draped over her earlier. The tension from the past days had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of trust. You know, Cynthia began, her voice barely above a whisper. I never thought a grown-up would really listen to me. Most people, they just tell you what to do. Jerry leaned back in his chair, a rare, gentle smile tugging at his lips. You're not most people, he replied. You speak with a courage and honesty that surprises me, especially at your age. Cynthia's lips curved into a shy smile. I'm not brave. I don't want my mommy to be alone. Jerry's heart tightened. That's exactly why you are brave, he said softly. Not because you aren't scared, but because you keep going anyway. For the first time, the space between them felt warm rather than intimidating. Cynthia shared little stories about her mother, her favorite songs, her silly little habits. And Jerry, surprisingly, began to share stories from his own childhood, memories of dreams long forgotten, and lessons learned in the emptiness of lonely boardrooms. Laughter began to fill the room, light and genuine, a fragile but beautiful bridge between their worlds. Jerry watched Cynthia carefully, noticing the subtle ways she carried herself. The way she carefully arranged her notebook, the way she paused thoughtfully before answering, the way her small fingers fidgeted with the edge of her blanket. Each detail deepened his admiration for her quiet strength. And Cynthia began to see Jerry in a new light, not just as a powerful CEO, but as someone who could care, who could notice her struggles, who could be gentle and patient. Do you think my mommy will get better? Cynthia asked softly, her eyes wide and searching. Jerry felt a pang in his chest. He wanted to give her absolute certainty, but life wasn't that simple. Still, he reached out, gently taking her small hand in his. I believe in you, he whispered. And I believe that trying, doing what you can, that makes a difference. That's how change begins. Cynthia's eyes brightened, and she squeezed his hand. The small gesture spoke volumes, a fragile, unspoken promise that they were both in this together. Hours passed in quiet conversation, laughter, and small confessions. Jerry shared a personal memory he had never told anyone, and Cynthia shared a secret hope for her mother's recovery. Every word, every glance, every laugh wove invisible threads between them. By the end of the evening, the office had transformed from a place of business into a safe haven. Jerry realized that opening his heart didn't make him weak, it made him human. And Cynthia felt a warmth she hadn't known in weeks, comforted by someone who truly saw her courage and understood her fears. The bond they had built was delicate but real, strong enough to begin shaping both of their lives in ways they hadn't expected. Have you ever felt a connection grow from shared stories and quiet moments? Comment Billonaire? The calm that had settled over the office felt fragile, and Cynthia sensed it almost immediately. A sudden phone call had come for Jerry, one that brought the weight of the outside world crashing back into their shared sanctuary. His face darkened as he spoke, and Cynthia, too small to understand the details, could only hear the sharp tone in his voice. "I can't believe this," Jerry muttered, ending the call abruptly. He ran a hand over his face, frustration and fatigue etched deep into his features. "They want this done by tomorrow morning," he said almost bitterly. "There's no time, no room for mistakes." Cynthia watched him, her small heart tightening. She had felt so safe in these past hours, had felt a bond forming, a connection she thought might last. But now everything shifted. Jerry's attention was torn, his patience fraying, and she felt an unfamiliar sting. Fear that she had somehow caused this tension, that her presence had brought complications. I didn't do anything wrong, did I?" she whispered, her voice quivering. Jerry looked at her, but instead of reassurance, the harshness of the moment reflected in his eyes. "Cynthia, it's not you, but I can't focus on everything right now." His words, though not meant to wound, hit her like a storm. Her chest tightened, and for the first time, she felt the weight of loneliness she had carried for so long. She turned away, wrapping her small arms around herself, retreating into the corner of the office where she had first waited. Jerry tried to reach for her, but the urgency of his business pulled him in another direction, leaving the connection strained and fragile. Hours later, when he returned to check on her, Cynthia barely looked up. I'll be okay," she said softly, but the words lacked conviction. Jerry felt a pang of guilt. The protective bond he had worked so hard to nurture was suddenly at risk of breaking. All because the outside world refused to pause. He sank into his chair, watching her quietly, realizing for the first time how vulnerable she truly was. Every decision, every delayed response, every moment of frustration on his part had consequences far beyond the office walls. And he understood that if he didn't act, if he didn't bridge this gap, he might lose the fragile trust they had built. The shatter point had arrived, not from a lack of care, but from the collision of urgency, stress, and miscommunication. Both of them sat in their separate corners, hearts heavy, longing for a reconnection but unsure how to reach it. Cynthia's small body trembled, not just from fear or cold, but from the sudden realization that even the strongest adults could falter. Jerry, for the first time, confronted the consequences of his inattention, understanding that love and connection were not safe simply because they were desired. They had to be nurtured, fiercely, even amid chaos. The emotional floor had dropped beneath them, leaving them both teetering on the edge, testing whether their bond could survive the storm. Have you ever felt misunderstood at the worst possible moment? Share your story below. The office was quiet now, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off the windows. Cynthia sat alone in her chair, hugging her knees, staring at the floor. The hurt from earlier still lingered, a heavy knot in her chest. She felt small, fragile, and unsure if the warmth she had felt with Jerry could ever return. Meanwhile, Jerry sat across the room, leaning back in his chair with his head in his hands. The tension and stress of the outside world had receded, leaving him facing a truth he could no longer ignore. He had let the one connection that mattered slip through his fingers. The memory of Cynthia's hopeful eyes and trusting smile haunted him, filling him with both regret and urgency. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity. Both were alone, physically near but emotionally distant, each grappling with the choice before them. Pride whispered to Jerry, urging him to focus on work, to maintain control. Fear whispered to Cynthia, telling her to retreat, to guard her heart. But deeper than pride or fear was something stronger. The bond they had formed, fragile but undeniable. Cynthia remembered Jerry's gentle words, his laughter, the way he had truly seen her courage. Jerry remembered the small hand that had squeezed his, the trust she had placed in him, the way her hope had lit a spark in his own heart. Finally, Jerry stood, his mind made up. He approached Cynthia slowly, kneeling to meet her at eye level. "Cynthia," he said softly, his voice trembling with sincerity, "I'm sorry. I should never have let the outside world make you feel small or unimportant. I was wrong." Cynthia's eyes welled with tears. She hesitated, unsure if she could trust the safety of this moment again. But something in his expression, genuine, vulnerable, and filled with care, reached her heart. "I forgive you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. A small smile broke through her tears. Jerry exhaled, relief flooding him. "We'll face this together," he promised. "Whatever comes next, you won't have to face it alone." In that moment, the choice was made. Vulnerability over pride, trust over fear, connection over isolation. Both of them felt the invisible threads of their bond strengthen, weaving hope, courage, and love into something resilient and enduring. The office, once a place of tension and misunderstanding, now felt alive with possibility. Outside, the city lights twinkled like 1,000 tiny promises. And inside, a fragile but steadfast connection had been fully reclaimed. Have you ever had to choose trust over fear? Share your story below. Morning light spilled through the office windows, soft and warm, illuminating the remnants of the night's tension. Cynthia sat on the edge of her chair, clutching the blanket Jerry had given her, but this time it wasn't for comfort from fear. It was a shield against the world, a reminder that she had someone who truly cared. Jerry entered quietly, holding 2 cups of cocoa. "Morning," he said softly, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I thought we could start today with something warm." Cynthia's eyes lit up, and for the first time in days, she returned a full, unguarded smile. "Thanks, Jerry." They sat side by side, sipping their cocoa in comfortable silence. The storm from the previous night felt like a distant memory, replaced by the calm of understanding, trust, and shared purpose. Jerry looked at her small hands wrapped around the mug, and his heart swelled with a protective warmth he hadn't realized he was capable of feeling. "I think we can do this," he said, breaking the silence. "Whatever comes next. Together." Cynthia nodded. "Together," she echoed. The word felt like a promise, solid and real. Later, as they left the office, Cynthia's mother appeared, frail but smiling, having just returned from her hospital checkup. The doctor's news had been cautiously optimistic. Cynthia ran to her mother, hugging her tightly, feeling relief, hope, and love all at once. Jerry watched, his heart full, realizing that his connection with Cynthia had opened him to emotions he had long suppressed: care, vulnerability, and the unshakable bond of genuine affection. He bent down to Cynthia's level. "See, I told you trying matters. And we've got each other." Cynthia nodded, leaning against him for a brief, comforting moment. It was simple, but it spoke volumes. The promise of protection, of care, and of a bond that had survived misunderstanding, fear, and the chaos of life. As the 3 of them walked into the sunlight outside the office, the city bustling around them, it felt like a new beginning. The hardships they had faced hadn't disappeared. But together they were stronger, braver, and ready to face whatever came next. The story came full circle. A small girl's courage, a billionaire's empathy, and the fragile, resilient bonds formed through trust and love had triumphed. It was a quiet, victorious moment. A reminder that even in a world full of challenges, connection and compassion could change lives forever. Have you ever experienced a bond that helped you overcome fear and uncertainty? Share below. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. Your time, your support, and your presence here mean more than words can say. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or kept you watching, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay blessed, stay strong, and keep believing in love. See you in the next story.